Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a topic that might surprise you.
Oh, is this one of those histories full of surprises kind of things?
Exactly. We're talking about religious tolerance.
Hmm.
And not just in, like, some modern progressive society, but in the Mongol Empire.
Now that's a curveball I wasn't expecting. We usually think of Genghis Khan as this fierce conqueror, right?
Yeah, the image we have is all about vast armies sweeping across continents.
Exactly. So where does tolerance fit into that picture?
That's the fascinating part.
Hmm.
It turns out Genghis Khan used tolerance as a tool, a way to build and manage this incredibly diverse empire he created.
Hmm. It's like maybe he was more strategic than we give him credit for.
Way more. He understood that to rule such a vast and diverse territory, he needed to find a way to unite people from all walks of life, all kinds of beliefs.
Okay, so paint me a picture. What kind of diversity are we talking about here? This is the Mongol Empire.
Yeah.
It stretched from East Asia all the way to Europe, right?
It's like an enormous landmass. And within its borders, you had Buddhists, Muslims, Christians, Taoists, you name it.
Wow, a genuine melting pot of cultures.
Exactly. Now, imagine you're a ruler back then, faced with that kind of diversity. What do you do?
Well, if you look at most rulers of the time, they tried to impose their own beliefs, their own religion on everybody else.
Force everyone to conform.
Right. But Genghis Khan, he saw the danger in that.
It would be a recipe for disaster, I imagine.
Total chaos, constant uprisings. I mean, try to imagine enforcing one religion over that vast a territory, that many different people.
It would be like trying to fit square pegs into round holes. It just wouldn't work.
Exactly. So instead of forcing conformity, Genghis Khan chose a different path. Tolerance.
So is this like, out of the goodness of his heart, was he just this super open-minded guy?
Well, he was definitely a brilliant strategist. And I think he recognized that tolerance wasn't just about being nice, it was a smart move.
A way to consolidate his power?
Exactly. Think about it. If you, as a subject of the empire, are allowed to keep your own beliefs, your cultural and spiritual identity, you're more likely to be loyal to the ruler, right?
It makes sense. If you feel respected, you're less likely to rebel.
Precisely. He turned what could have been a source of weakness, all that diversity, into a strength.
Now, that's a powerful insight.
Oh.
And it resonates so much with today's world, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Look around. Societies are becoming more and more diverse, and we're still figuring out how to navigate all those differences.
It's one of the biggest challenges we face, for sure.
And here we have the Mongols, all the way back in the 13th century, showing us a possible way forward.
So tolerance wasn't just some idealistic notion for them. It was a core part of their strategy for success.
Absolutely. I mean, they built the largest contiguous land empire in history.
Exactly. But I'm curious, did they just say, hey, believe whatever you want and leave it at that? Or was there more to it?
Oh, there was definitely more to it. They had very specific ways of making this tolerance a reality. And the results, well, they speak for themselves. But that's something we can explore in more detail as we go deeper.
Now we're getting to the good stuff.
This is where it gets really interesting. The Mongols didn't just tolerate different religions. They actually figured out how to benefit from that diversity.
Okay, I'm all ears. How did they do that?
Well, first, let's talk about the Silk Road.
Ah, the famous network of trade routes connecting East and West.
That's the one. And it flourished under Mongol rule. And a big part of that was their tolerance policy.
So merchants felt safe traveling through the empire.
Exactly. Imagine you're a merchant traveling for months, carrying valuable goods. You want to know you'll be safe, regardless of your faith. That's the environment the Mongols created.
A sort of ancient free trade zone.
Exactly. And because of that, all sorts of goods, ideas, and technologies flowed through their empire.
It's like they created this incredible economic engine fueled by diversity.
Right. And it wasn't just trade either. Think about all the skills and knowledge the Mongols acquired as they conquered new lands.
They encountered so many different cultures, different ways of doing things.
Exactly. And instead of saying, you have to do things our way, they were open to learning from others. They integrated skilled artisans, scholars from different backgrounds into their society.
So they were basically attracting the best and the brightest from all over.
Exactly. And using that talent to strengthen their empire. If they'd forced everyone to conform, they would have missed out on so much.
So they boosted their economy and their intellectual capital, all thanks to this tolerance policy.
It was a key ingredient in their success, without a doubt. And it's a reminder that diversity, it's not just about being politically correct. It's about tapping into the unique strengths and perspectives of different people to create something truly remarkable.
Okay, I'm convinced about the why now, but I'm really curious about the how. How did they actually implement this policy? What did it look like on the ground?
Ah, well, that's where it gets even more interesting. We're going to have to delve a little deeper into the mechanisms they use to make this tolerance a reality.
Sounds like a story for our next segment.
Absolutely. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of how they made it all work, and trust me, there's a lot to learn from their approach, even today.
So we've established that the Mongols' tolerance wasn't just some vague idea they had.
Yeah, it wasn't just like, oh, we're cool with everyone.
It was this calculated strategy that paid off big time.
It's fascinating, right?
Totally. But I'm still stuck on the how. Like, how did it actually work in practice? Did they have a ministry of tolerance or something?
Not exactly, but what they did have was a legal code. It was called the Yasa.
The Yasa. Sounds kind of intense.
Well, it was pretty comprehensive, governed every aspect of life in the empire.
So like their version of the Constitution?
Kind of. And
Heck
within
yeah.
the Yasa, they had these specific clauses just for religious freedom.
Oh, so it was written into law.
Yeah, like no forced conversions, didn't matter what your faith was.
That's pretty progressive for the time.
Right. And they also made sure that places of worship were protected, no matter what religion.
So it wasn't just this casual live and let live attitude, it was codified.
Exactly. And that made a huge difference. People felt secure. Like if their freedom was violated, they had the law on their side.
I mean, that's something we could learn from today, right?
Totally. Having clear legal frameworks that protect everyone, regardless of what they believe.
Right, because without that, tolerance is just a word.
Exactly. Okay, so they had the laws, but laws are only as good as their enforcement.
That's the age-old problem, isn't it?
Right. So the Mongols, they went beyond just setting laws. They implemented policies that encourage interaction between different faiths.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Well, one thing they did was exempt clergy from taxes, no matter what religion.
So they were supporting religious institutions actively.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, we value your role in society, we're going to invest in it. It freed up religious leaders to do their thing, help their communities. So smart. A thriving religious landscape makes for a more stable society. But what about everyday life? Did regular people actually get along?
Well, I mean, it's like any society. You had some tension, some conflict.
People are people, right?
Exactly. But what's remarkable is that the Mongol leadership, they consistently stepped in, resolved these conflicts, and just reaffirmed their commitment to tolerance.
So they were proactive, not just ignoring problems.
Oh, yeah, totally. They wanted to make sure that the policy was actually working. I mean, there are stories, for example, about a Muslim community that was trying to stop a Christian community from building a church.
Ah, the classic not in my backyard situation.
Right. And this could have escalated easily. But when the Mongol governor heard about it, he shut it down, allowed the church to be built, and even punished the folks who were trying to block it.
Wow. That's a strong message.
Yeah, it shows they were serious. They were willing to go against the wishes of some people to uphold the principle of religious tolerance. It's incredible. And it really makes you wonder, what if more leaders today had that kind of commitment to inclusivity?
It's a good question. It's like the Mongols, with this reputation for brutality and war, they offer this surprisingly relevant example of how powerful tolerance can be.
And not just as some moral ideal, but as something that can actually make a society function better.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've seen how their tolerance worked in their laws, their policies, even how they dealt with everyday disputes. But I'm curious about Genghis Khan himself. Was he genuinely tolerant? Or was this all just about power?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Historians still debate this. It's tough to separate the man from the myth.
Right.
On one hand, he was a conqueror, brutal, responsible for a lot of violence. But on the other hand, he clearly saw the value in tolerance.
So maybe it was a mix. Pragmatism and a genuine belief in the principle.
Maybe. It's hard to say. But what we can say for sure is that his policy had a huge impact. I mean, it challenged everything people believed back then, and it's still relevant today.
Yeah. Imagine if he tried to force everyone to conform. His empire probably would have collapsed.
It's hard to say for sure, but the way they embraced diversity, it clearly played a role in their success.
It really makes you think. But wait, there's more to the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happened after the Mongol Empire declined? Did this idea of tolerance just disappear?
Ah, that is a great question. And The answer might surprise you. The Mongols might be gone, but their legacy, especially when it comes to tolerance, it had a ripple effect.
A ripple effect. Okay, now you've got me hooked. What kind of ripple effect?
It's like, imagine dropping a pebble in a pond, you know? The ripples, they spread out, they keep going.
Okay, but what does that look like in terms of, like, actual history?
So you've got other empires, other rulers, they see the Mongols, all this stability, all this prosperity, and they're like, maybe we should try that tolerance thing.
So the Mongols were kind of trendsetters.
In a way, yeah. I mean, they weren't setting out to be like the poster children for religious freedom,
Yeah.
but their success, it made people think.
Like, hey, if it worked for them, maybe it'll work for us.
Exactly. So, for example, you've got the Ottoman Empire. They came after the Mongols, and they also had these policies of religious tolerance.
They saw how it could be a strength, not a weakness.
Exactly. They had this vast domain, all these different faiths, and it worked for them too.
It's amazing how an idea can travel like that.
It really is. And it kept going, you know? Like through history, this idea of religious freedom that we have today, the Mongols, they were part of that story.
Wow. So even though their empire is long gone, their ideas still matter.
Oh, absolutely. Even empires built on conquest, they can leave a positive mark. It's a reminder that we're still grappling with this stuff today, you know?
Yeah. Trying to build inclusive societies. It's hard.
It is. So what can we learn from all this? What's the takeaway?
What can the Mongols teach us about living in a diverse world?
Well, for one thing, they teach us that inclusivity, it's not just some nice to have, it's practical.
It actually makes a society stronger.
Exactly. It's not just about being nice. It's about stability, prosperity.
Like, united we stand, divided we fall.
Yeah, exactly. The Mongols, they might have been brutal, but they understood that unity doesn't mean everyone has to be the same.
That's a big lesson.
It is, but it's easier said than done.
Right. It's easy to admire the Mongols from a distance.
Right.
But what about now? Like, how do we apply this stuff in our own lives?
Yeah, good point. It takes effort, you know? It starts with being open-minded, willing to listen to people who are different from us.
Challenge our own biases.
Right. And actually create spaces where everyone feels safe, respected. It doesn't matter their background, their beliefs.
So more than just tolerance, it's about empathy, understanding.
Exactly. And that's something we all have a part in. Everyone.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it, that we can learn so much from an empire that existed centuries ago.
It is. And, you know, it shows that this whole journey towards a more tolerant, inclusive world, it's ongoing. It takes work.
But it's worth it.
Yeah, the Mongols prove that. And who knows, maybe in the future, people will look back at us and be like, wow, look at the progress they made.
Or maybe they'll wonder what took us so long.
Right. It's up to us to write that story.
Well, that's a great note to end on, I think. So that wraps up our deep dive into the Mongol Empire and their approach to tolerance.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you all for listening.